The voicemail came in while I was reviewing fabric swatches for Mrs. Harrington's dining room remodel. "Emma, it's Mom. Just letting you know we're keeping Thanksgiving small this year. We think it might be best if you and Nathan take the kids somewhere else for the holiday. Things have been strained lately, and everyone needs a break from the tension. Call me back." I stared at my phone, my fingers frozen over the blue velvet sample I'd been about to place in my client folder. The message wasn't a surprise. Not really. My mother's voice had that rehearsed quality I recognized all too well. The tone she used when she'd already discussed something extensively with my father and sister, and was just delivering their collective verdict. I played it again, letting the words sink in. "Take the kids somewhere else." Translation: "You're not welcome at the family Thanksgiving," the family gathering that had taken place every year without exception since before I was born. The one tradition that my parents had insisted was sacred, non-negotiable. And now I was being uninvited. No, not uninvited, banned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I suppose I should have seen it coming. The last few family gatherings had been tense. My crime? I had started speaking up. After 32 years of playing peacekeeper, of swallowing my thoughts and feelings to keep everyone comfortable, I had finally found my voice. It started small, pushing back when my sister Olivia volunteered me to host the Easter egg hunt without asking, declining to loan her my designer handbag after she'd returned my cashmere sweater with wine stains, suggesting that maybe my children deserved equal time and attention from their grandparents as their cousins did. Apparently, this constituted being difficult. I set down my fabric samples and took a deep breath, staring out the window of my home office. Outside, the October, leaves were turning brilliant shades of orange and gold, drifting down from the massive maples that lined the circular driveway of our home, the home that had become the center of so much family drama. Nathan and I had purchased the old Henderson estate 6 months ago. The sprawling Victorian mansion had been sitting empty for years, slowly deteriorating, until we secured it for a surprisingly reasonable price. It needed extensive work, the kind of top-to-bottom restoration that most people would run from. But I had built my interior design business on transforming forgotten spaces, and this property was my masterpiece. We'd poured our savings into it, leveraging the success of Nathan's tech company and my newly national design firm. The renovation had been featured in 2 major magazines, bringing in a flood of high-profile clients. But to my family, especially my sister, our new home wasn't a testament to hard work. It was an act of showing off. She always has to one-up everyone, I'd overheard Olivia telling my mother at Jack's birthday party last month. Who needs 6 bedrooms and a library? It's excessive. She's just trying to make the rest of us feel small. I hadn't bothered defending myself. The pattern was too familiar. Olivia would criticize, my parents would nod sympathetically, and I would be cast as the villain regardless of what I said. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Meeting running late. Pick up kids or 4?" I texted. Back a quick affirmative and tried to refocus on my work. The Harrington project was important, a wealthy client who could refer more business. But my mother's voicemail kept replaying in my mind. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I showed Nathan the message. "They're uninviting us from Thanksgiving?" His expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Because you finally stopped letting them walk all over you?" I sank onto our living room couch, tracing the pattern on one of the throw pillows I'd hand-selected during our renovation. Apparently, having boundaries makes me difficult. Nathan sat beside me, his hand warm on mine. "Em, you've bent over backward for your family your entire life. You've rearranged your schedule for last-minute babysitting requests. You've loaned money that was never repaid. You've let your sister take credit for your ideas." He squeezed my fingers gently. "And the one time you start standing up for yourself, they punish you by taking away a holiday." I nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in my throat. I should call her back. And say what? That you're sorry for having self-respect? I didn't answer. What would I say? That I was sorry for suggesting my parents spend equal time with Lily and Jack as they did with Sophie and Zoe? Sorry for mentioning that they'd missed Jack's school play but had attended Sophie's ballet recital the same week. Sorry for noticing the pattern that had existed my entire life. You know what? Nathan said, a new determination in his voice. Let's host Thanksgiving here. I looked up at him, confused. What? Our home is perfect for entertaining. We have the space, the dining room table seats 20, and you're an amazing cook. Let's host Thanksgiving ourselves. The idea settled over me slowly, like a warm blanket. Our home, with its newly restored grandeur, was made for gatherings. The formal dining room with its coffered ceiling and crystal chandelier. The sprawling chef's kitchen with double ovens and a massive island. The cozy library where guests could relax after dinner. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A Thanksgiving without walking on eggshells, without Olivia's backhanded compliments, without my father's dismissive comments about my decorating hobby. Never mind that my hobby now supported our family. We could invite Uncle Mark, I said slowly. My father's younger brother had always been kind to me, the only one who seemed to notice the family's dynamic. And maybe some friends who don't have local family. Nathan's smile grew. Exactly. People who actually appreciate you. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. Okay, let's do it. The next morning, I didn't call my mother back. Instead, I texted, "Got your message. Hope you all have a nice holiday." 6 words. No argument, no pleading, no explanation, just acknowledgement and release. Then I opened my contact list and began planning our own Thanksgiving. The first person I called was Uncle Mark. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with surprise. "Emma, what a nice midweek treat. How are you, kiddo?" I explained the situation, my parents' decision, our plan to host our own gathering. I tried to keep my voice neutral, not wanting to put him in the middle of family drama, but he saw through me immediately. "They uninvited you? Because you've started standing up for yourself?" His tone held none of the surprise I'd expected. "That sounds about right for my brother and your mother." "You don't seem shocked," I said. Mark sighed. "Emma, I've watched how they treat you since you were a little girl. The different rules for you and Olivia. The way they'd praise her for the same things they criticized you for. I've never understood it." His words hit me with unexpected force. All these years I'd thought I was imagining things. That the knot in my stomach at family gatherings was my own oversensitivity. That the constant feeling of being measured and found wanting was just in my head. "So I'm not crazy," I whispered. "No, honey, you're not crazy. You're just finally seeing clearly." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Would you come to our Thanksgiving? It would mean a lot to have family there who—" I trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Who sees you?" Mark supplied gently. "I wouldn't miss it. Just tell me what to bring." After hanging up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the calendar on my wall. November 25th, Thanksgiving, was circled in red. I'd marked it months ago, assuming we'd be at my parents' house as always. Now it represented something different, a declaration of independence. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into planning. I invited Nathan's colleague James and his wife Sarah, who had no family nearby. My close friend Diane, recently divorced and dreading the holidays. Nathan's cousin Tyler and his husband Michael, who had been subtly excluded from family gatherings for years. By the time I was done, we had 12 adults and 5 children coming, a full house of people who genuinely wanted to be together. I ordered a heritage turkey from a local farm, planned a menu that combined traditional favorites with some new recipes I'd been wanting to try, and designed table settings that would showcase the beauty of our restored dining room without being overly formal. Planning the gathering gave me purpose, a way to channel the hurt of my family's rejection into something positive. But it didn't completely shield me from the pain. The text came from Olivia a week before Thanksgiving. Mom said, "You're not coming for the holiday. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? Just apologize so we can move on." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar flame of indignation mixed with guilt. Always my fault. Always my responsibility to make peace, regardless of who had caused the breach. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "I'm not being dramatic. I'm respecting Mom's decision and making alternative plans. Have a nice holiday." Her reply was immediate. "This is exactly why you weren't invited. You're so difficult now. Ever since you got that big house and all those magazine features, you think you're better than everyone." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I set my phone down without responding. There was no point. In Olivia's narrative, I would always be the villain, no matter what I said or did. Instead, I channeled my energy into finishing my Thanksgiving preparations. I created handmade place cards with pressed fall leaves. I polished the silver candelabras that would run down the center of the table. I arranged and rearranged the guest bedroom for Uncle Mark, who would be staying overnight. The Saturday before Thanksgiving, I was at the farmer's market selecting fresh vegetables when I ran into Carol Johnson, my mother's oldest friend. She did a double take when she saw me, then hurried over. "Emma, I was just talking about you with your mother." I smiled politely. "Hi, Carol. How are you?" "Good. Good." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Your mother told me about the situation with Thanksgiving. She's very upset, you know." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "She says you've changed, that ever since you bought that big house, you've been looking down on the family, that you criticize everything they do." Carol tilted her head, studying me. "I've known you since you were a little girl, Emma. That doesn't sound like you." I took a deep breath. "It's not me, Carol. I haven't changed. I've just stopped pretending that the way they treat me is okay." Carol frowned. "What do you mean?" Something in her genuine confusion made me decide to be honest. "Did my mother tell you that my parents attended all 3 of Olivia's daughter's school events last month, but skipped my son's play? Or that, at our last family dinner, my father interrupted me 7 times but listened attentively to everything Olivia said? Or that when Nathan's company was featured in Business Weekly, my mother's only comment was to ask if we were flaunting our success?" Carol's expression shifted from confusion to discomfort. "I'm sure they don't mean to show favoritism. Maybe not consciously," I acknowledged, "but it happens consistently. And now that I've started pointing it out, I'm difficult. So difficult that I'm banned from Thanksgiving." Carol was quiet for a moment. "And what are you doing for the holiday instead?" A small, defiant part of me wanted to lie. To say we were going to a resort, or to Nathan's family in Michigan. But the truth was nothing to be ashamed of. "I'm hosting Thanksgiving at our home. We've invited friends and some family who want to celebrate with us." Carol's eyebrows shot up. "You're hosting your own Thanksgiving at your house? The one that was in Architectural Digest?" I nodded, suddenly understanding where this conversation was headed. "Well," Carol said, looking thoughtful, "that's interesting. Your mother didn't mention that part." Of course she didn't. In my mother's version of events, I was probably sitting alone, punished and excluded, learning my lesson about challenging the family hierarchy. "It should be a lovely gathering," I said simply. "I have to get going, Carol. It was nice seeing you." As I walked away, I could practically hear the phone call that would happen the moment Carol got to her car. By dinner time, my mother would know that her excluded daughter wasn't moping at home, but hosting a rival Thanksgiving in her mansion, the home that had become such a source of family tension. Sure enough, my phone rang that evening as I was helping Lily with her homework. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided against it. I'd spent enough of my life avoiding difficult conversations. "Hello?" "Emma." My mother's voice was tight. "I just had the most interesting call from Carol Johnson." "Did you?" I kept my tone neutral. "She said you're hosting Thanksgiving at your house. Is that true?" "Yes." There was a pause, as if she'd expected me to elaborate, to justify myself. When I didn't, she continued, "Who exactly are you inviting to this gathering?" The slight emphasis on gathering made it clear she didn't consider it a real Thanksgiving. Only the Taylor family Thanksgiving, her Thanksgiving, counted. "Some friends, Uncle Mark, people who want to spend the holiday with us." Another pause. "Mark is coming to your house for Thanksgiving? But he always comes here." I closed my eyes briefly. I invited him, and he accepted. "I see." Her voice had taken on the wounded quality I knew so well. "So you're deliberately creating a competing event, trying to pull the family apart." The irony was almost laughable. "Mom, you uninvited me from Thanksgiving. What did you expect me to do? Sit at home alone while you all celebrated without me?" "I expected you to take some time to reflect on your behavior lately, to realize that the way you've been acting isn't acceptable." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the automatic response to my mother's disapproval that had been conditioned into me since childhood. But alongside it was something new, clarity. "What isn't acceptable," I said carefully, "is being treated like I'm less important than Olivia. What isn't acceptable is having my children overlooked while their cousins are lavished with attention. What isn't acceptable is being punished for speaking up about it." "That's not what's happening, Emma. You're twisting things as usual." "As usual." The words hung in the air between us. This was the script we'd been following my entire life. I would point out an inequity, and my concerns would be dismissed as an overreaction, an overcomplication, a misinterpretation. "I have to go, Mom. Lily needs help with her science project." "Emma, wait." But I had already ended the call. Nathan found me in the kitchen an hour later, aggressively kneading dough for the dinner rolls I was testing for Thanksgiving. "That poor dough didn't do anything to you," he said gently, placing his hands on my shoulders. I realized I was taking out my frustration on the innocent bread. My mother called. Carol told her about our Thanksgiving plans. Nathan's hands stilled. And she's upset that Uncle Mark is coming here instead of going there. She accused me of trying to pull the family apart. I turned to face him, flour dusting my hands. "Nathan, am I the problem? Am I too sensitive? Too demanding?" He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes serious. "Emma, I've watched you bend yourself into knots trying to please your family for as long as I've known you. You've made excuses for their behavior, accepted less than you deserve, and blamed yourself when they've hurt you." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "You're not too sensitive," he continued. "You're finally acknowledging a truth you've known subconsciously for years. Your parents favor Olivia. They always have. And rather than examining that painful reality, they're punishing you for naming it." I leaned into him, letting his steady presence anchor me. "I just wanted them to see me," I whispered. "To value me as much as they value her." "I know," he murmured into my hair, "and it's not wrong to want that, but you can't make them give you something they're not willing or able to give." As Thanksgiving approached, I threw myself into preparations with renewed purpose. This wasn't just a meal. It was a statement, a declaration that I deserved to be surrounded by people who appreciated me, who didn't make me feel like I was constantly falling short. The night before Thanksgiving, I stood in our dining room, surveying the table I'd set. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. The antique china we'd collected piece by piece over the years gleamed against the cream-colored tablecloth. Fresh flowers and candles created a warm, inviting atmosphere. It was beautiful. It was enough. I was enough. Uncle Mark arrived early Thanksgiving morning, greeting me with a bear hug and a bottle of expensive bourbon. For after the turkey, he winked, setting it on the counter. The house gradually filled with the smells of roasting turkey and baking, pies with the sounds of children playing and adults laughing. Our friends arrived, bringing side dishes and wine, exclaiming over the beauty of our home, helping in the kitchen, making themselves comfortable in a way my own family never had. At 4 o'clock, we gathered around the table. The children, excited and slightly wild, were settled into their seats. The turkey, golden and perfect, waited to be carved. The moment felt significant. The first Thanksgiving of a new tradition. I looked around at the faces surrounding our table. Nathan, solid and supportive. Lily and Jack, their eyes wide with anticipation. Uncle Mark, raising his glass in a subtle toast to me. Our friends, happy to be included in our holiday. This, I realized, was what family should feel like. Warm, accepting, safe. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table as he stood to say a few words. Before we eat, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Especially Emma, who put this beautiful meal together and who makes our house a home every day. The genuine appreciation in his voice brought tears to my eyes. Uncle Mark raised his glass higher. To Emma, who reminds us that family is about how people treat you, not just who you're related to. To Emma, everyone echoed. As we passed dishes and filled plates, as conversation and laughter flowed freely, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a weight I'd carried for so long. I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me, the weight of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. My phone buzzed in my pocket during dessert. A text from Olivia. Mom's upset that Uncle Mark is at your house. Dad says he's being disloyal. I read it quickly and put my phone away without responding. Their drama felt distant now, like a storm on the horizon that couldn't touch the warmth of the moment I was in. Later, after our guests had gone home with leftovers packages and warm hugs, after the children were tucked into bed with full bellies, and happy memories, I sat with Nathan and Uncle Mark in the library, sipping bourbon by the fire. Your mother called me this morning, Mark said suddenly. Wanted to know why I was taking sides. I winced. I'm sorry I put you in that position. He waved away my apology. You didn't put me anywhere, Emma. I made my choice. And seeing you today, relaxed, happy, surrounded by people who appreciate you, I know it was the right one. They'll never change, will they? I asked softly. Mark considered this, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. People can change, but only if they recognize there's a problem. Your parents and sister don't see anything wrong with how they treat you. In their minds, you're the one who's changed, who's causing problems. I nodded slowly. So what now? Now, he said gently, you stop waiting for their approval. You stop trying to earn what should be freely given. You build your life around people who see your worth. Nathan reached for my hand. You deserve that, Em. I looked around our beautiful library, at the home we'd created, at the man who had always seen me clearly, at the uncle who had chosen to support me even when it was difficult. For the first time, I truly believed it. I did deserve better, and I wasn't going to settle for less anymore. The next morning, I woke early and sat by the window in our bedroom, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from my father. Your behavior is hurting this family. I set the phone aside without responding. Their words couldn't reach me here, in this quiet moment of clarity. I had spent years trying to earn a place at their table, never questioning why I had to work so hard for what came effortlessly to Olivia. I had accepted their narrative that I was too sensitive, too demanding, too difficult. I had believed that if I just tried harder, they would finally see me. But sitting there, watching the new day dawn, I understood the truth. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had created my own table, surrounded myself with people who valued me without conditions, built a life that reflected my worth rather than their perception of it. And that was something to be truly thankful for. I didn't respond to my mother's voicemail for 3 days. Each morning, I'd wake up with the intention of calling her back, of trying to smooth things over, as I always had. And each morning, I'd find a reason to delay. A client meeting that couldn't be rescheduled, Lily's school project that needed attention, the paint samples for the guest bathroom that had to be approved. It wasn't until Nathan caught me staring at my phone during breakfast, my thumb hovering over my mother's contact, that I admitted the truth. "I don't want to call her back," I said softly. "I don't want to apologize for something I didn't do wrong." He reached across the kitchen island and squeezed my hand. "Then don't." Such a simple statement, but it felt revolutionary. Don't apologize. Don't smooth things over. Don't absorb the blame to keep the peace. When I finally did text my mother, that brief, non-confrontational message, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Like setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. That relief lasted exactly 4 days. I was in the middle of a client consultation when my phone lit up with Olivia's name. I silenced it, but she called again immediately, and then a third time. "I'm so sorry," I told Mrs. Chambers, a new client who was renovating her lakefront condo. "I need to take this. It might be about my kids." I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Olivia, I'm with a client. Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay," she snapped. "Mom just told me you're not coming to Thanksgiving." I closed my eyes briefly. "That's right. Mom suggested we make other plans this year." "Don't act innocent. You know exactly what you did." I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. This was the pattern. Olivia would accuse, I would defend, and somehow I'd end up apologizing even though I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. Not this time. "Olivia, I'm working. If there's something specific you want to discuss, we can talk later." "See? This is exactly what Mom means. You're so dismissive now. Ever since you got that house, you think you're better than everyone." There it was again, the house. The 6-bedroom Victorian that Nathan and I had poured our hearts, souls, and savings into restoring. The home we'd created for our family. Somehow, it had become evidence of our arrogance, proof that we were showing off. "My home has nothing to do with this," I said, keeping my voice level. "Mom uninvited me from Thanksgiving. I accepted that and made other plans. That's all." Olivia scoffed. "You didn't get uninvited. Mom just suggested that maybe this year we all needed a break from your constant criticism and judgment." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Was that how they saw me? Critical and judgmental? When have I ever been critical of you, Olivia? Are you kidding? You're always making little comments. About my parenting, about my house, about my clothes. Like when you asked if I really needed another designer handbag while Greg was between jobs. I frowned, trying to recall the conversation she was referencing. "You mean when you asked to borrow my Prada bag? The one I saved for 6 months to buy? I didn't criticize you. I just said no." "Whatever, Emma. The point is, you've changed. You used to be fun. Now you're just difficult." She emphasized the word, making it clear this was the family's new label for me. Difficult Emma. Problem Emma. I thought of all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. All the times I'd loaned things that were returned damaged or not. At all. All the times I'd rearranged my schedule to babysit Sophie and Zoe with zero notice, while my requests for the same favor were met with excuses. "You know what?" I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Maybe I have changed. Maybe I've finally realized that I deserve the same consideration I've always given everyone else." There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. "Just tell Mom you're sorry," Olivia finally said. "Say you've been stressed with work, that you didn't mean to be so harsh. She'll forgive you, and we can all have Thanksgiving together. Like we always do." I glanced at my watch. Mrs. Chambers was waiting, and this conversation was going nowhere. "I have to get back to my client, Olivia. We can talk more later if you want." "So that's it? Your job is more important than family. Now?" I bit back a retort about the countless times she'd interrupted family gatherings to take work calls. About the birthday parties and school events of mine she'd missed over the years because she had more important commitments. "Goodbye, Olivia," I said instead, and ended the call. When I returned to Mrs. Chambers, she gave me a sympathetic look. "Family drama?" I nodded, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry about that." She waved away my apology. "Trust me, I understand. My sister and I didn't speak for 5 years after our mother died. Sometimes the hardest relationships are the ones we're born into." I must have looked surprised because she continued. "The secret is figuring out which relationships are worth fighting for and which ones are just habits." Her words stayed with me as I drove home that evening, the fall sunset painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange and pink. Which of my family relationships were worth fighting for? And which ones had I maintained simply because I thought I had to? Nathan was in the kitchen when I got home, attempting to help Jack with his spelling homework while simultaneously stirring something on the stove that smelled suspiciously burnt. "Reinforcements have arrived," I announced, dropping my bag and coat on a chair. "What are we having for dinner? Or rather, what were we having before it became charcoal?" Nathan grinned sheepishly. "Chicken stir-fry," but I got distracted trying to explain why knife starts with a silent K. "Because English is weird," Jack offered helpfully, not looking up from his worksheet. I laughed, feeling some of the tension from the day slide away. This was my real family: Nathan, Lily, and Jack. The people who saw me clearly, who loved me as I was. The people I never had to diminish myself for. After the kids were in bed, Nathan and I sat at the kitchen island with glasses of wine, and I told him about my conversation with Olivia. She actually said I was being critical when I wouldn't loan her my Prada bag, the one I bought myself as a reward when the Nichols project was featured in Home and Design. Nathan nodded slowly. Classic Olivia. Turned down one request after saying yes to 100 others, and suddenly, you're the selfish one. I sipped my wine, thinking, what bothers me most is that she really believes it. In her version of events, I've turned into this awful, critical person who looks down on everyone. Because that's easier than acknowledging that you've simply started setting boundaries. I considered this. Maybe. Or maybe I really have changed and don't realize it. Nathan gave me a look. Last week you spent 3 hours helping Diane plan her son's birthday party after she had a panic attack about it. The week before that, you drove across town in a rainstorm to take soup to James when he had the flu. You're still the most generous person I know. I smiled, warmed by his defense. Only to people who appreciate it. Exactly. You've stopped pouring energy into relationships that drain you. That's not being difficult. That's being healthy. I nodded, wanting to believe him, but doubt still nagged at me. If my own sister, the person who had known me longest, saw me as critical and judgmental, was there some truth to it? I keep asking myself if I'm overreacting, I admitted. Maybe I should just call Mom, smooth things over, go to Thanksgiving like nothing happened. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something? If Lily came to you in 20 years and said her family was treating her the way yours treats you, what would you tell her to do?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "I'd tell her she deserves better," I whispered. "So why don't you deserve better too?" I had no answer for that. The next morning, I woke early and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Nathan. Wrapped in my robe, I made coffee and carried it to my home office, where the first light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the windows. My desk faced east, overlooking the sweeping front lawn of our property. The massive oak trees that lined the driveway were half bare now, their fallen leaves creating a golden carpet on the grass below. In the distance, the lake glimmered silver in the morning light. I hadn't grown up with this kind of beauty surrounding me. My childhood home was a modest ranch-style house in a typical suburban neighborhood. Nice enough, but nothing special. Nothing like what Olivia and her family now had. A sleek, modern home in the most prestigious development in town, courtesy of Greg's family money, and nothing like what Nathan and I had created here. Our home wasn't just about size or luxury. It was about vision, about seeing potential where others saw only decay. We'd bought the old Henderson estate when no one else wanted it, when it was a crumbling eyesore with peeling paint and rotting woodwork. I remembered the real estate agent's skeptical expression when we'd first toured it. "It's a teardown," she'd said bluntly. The renovation costs would be astronomical. But where she saw problems, I saw possibilities. The original hardwood floors under layers of carpet, the hand-carved moldings beneath decades of paint, the graceful bones of a house that had once been the pride of Lakeside. We'd spent every spare moment of the past 6 months bringing it back to life. Weekends stripping woodwork, evenings poring over tile samples and paint colors. Nathan had learned basic plumbing to restore the vintage fixtures in the powder room. I'd spent countless hours hunting for period-appropriate lighting and hardware at salvage yards and antique shops, and the result was everything we'd dreamed of. A home that honored its history while reflecting our personal style. A place where our children could grow up with space to play and explore. A setting where we could entertain friends and clients with pride. Was it wrong to want this? To create something beautiful and be proud of it? According to my family, apparently yes. In their narrative, our home was an ostentatious display, a way of showing off our success. Never mind that Olivia's house cost twice as much as ours. Never mind that my parents' country club membership cost more annually than our mortgage payment. Those things were acceptable. Our restored Victorian was not. I sipped my coffee, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the bare branches of the oak trees. Why did my family's opinion still matter so much to me? Why did their disapproval still have the power to make me question myself? Mrs. Chambers' words from yesterday echoed in my mind. Sometimes the hardest relationships are the ones we're born into. The quiet of the morning was broken by the sound of small feet padding down the hallway. Lily appeared in the doorway, her hair a wild tangle around her face, still in her unicorn pajamas. "Mommy? Why are you up so early?" I smiled, opening my arms to her. "Just thinking, sweetie. Come here." She climbed into my lap, warm and sleepy, resting her head against my shoulder. At 8, she was getting too big for this, but I treasured these moments, knowing they wouldn't last forever. "Are you thinking about Thanksgiving?" she asked, surprising me. "Why do you ask that?" She shrugged. "You said we're not going to." "Grandma and Grandpa's this year. Are you sad about it?" I considered the question carefully. "A little bit. Change can be hard sometimes, even when it's for the best." Lily nodded sagely. "Like when I switched dance classes because Madame Pierre was mean. I missed my friends, but Miss Angela is much nicer." I hugged her closer, struck by the simple wisdom of her example. "Exactly like that, honey." "I think Thanksgiving here will be better anyway," she declared, We can have mac and cheese instead of that gross green bean thing Grandma makes. I laughed. We absolutely can. Lily hopped off my lap. Can I help decorate? Sophie said their house always looks fancy for Thanksgiving with gourds and stuff. I felt a pang at the mention of my niece. The cousins were close, despite the tensions between the adults. Of course you can help. Maybe we can go shopping for decorations this weekend. She beamed and skipped off, presumably to wake her brother, with the exciting news about mac and cheese and decorations. Left alone again, I turned back to the window, but my thoughts had shifted. The doubt and self-questioning had been replaced by a new determination. If we were going to host Thanksgiving, we were going to do it right. Not to show off or prove anything to my family, but to create something meaningful for ourselves and our guests. I opened my laptop and began making a list. By the following weekend, Operation Thanksgiving was in full swing. I'd invited Uncle Mark, Nathan's colleague James and his wife Sarah, my friend Diane and her son, Nathan's cousin Tyler and his husband Michael, and my favorite clients, the Hendersons, who had mentioned they had no family nearby. 12 adults and 5 children in total. A perfect number for our dining room table with the extension leaves added. I took the kids shopping for decorations as promised, letting them select an assortment of pumpkins, gourds, and fall foliage that would adorn the dining room and entryway. Lily, ever the artist, spent an entire Sunday afternoon creating hand-painted place cards for each guest, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully lettered each name. Even Uncle Mark? She asked when I gave her the guest list. Especially Uncle Mark, I confirmed. He's coming all the way from Boston just to have Thanksgiving with us. Her eyes widened. But doesn't he always go to Grandma and Grandpa's? I nodded. He usually does. But this year he chose to come here instead. Won't Grandma be mad at him? The question was so perceptive that it caught me off guard. Why do you think she might be mad? Lily shrugged, returning to her painting. Grandma gets mad when people don't do what she wants. Out of the mouths of babes. I watched my daughter carefully printing Uncle Mark's name on a card decorated with fall leaves and turkeys, and wondered what other dynamics she had observed with those clear, unfiltered eyes. You know what, Lily? You're right. Grandma might be upset with Uncle Mark for coming here, but he's making his own choice, just like we all get to do. She nodded, accepting this with the straightforward logic of childhood. Can I make an extra place card, in case someone else wants to come? Of course, sweetie. That's a great idea. As she bent over her project again, I felt a surge of pride, not just in her thoughtfulness, but in the example we were setting. We were showing our children that it was possible to choose peace over conflict, to create joy even in difficult situations, to build new traditions when old ones no longer served. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I finalized the menu, ordered the turkey, and began preparing dishes that could be made ahead and frozen. Nathan cleared out the guest room for Uncle Mark and helped the kids create a Welcome to Thanksgiving banner to hang in the foyer. In the midst of it all, life went on. Client meetings, school drop-offs, soccer practices. The everyday rhythm, that grounded us even as the holiday approached. It was after one such soccer practice, as I was helping Jack into the car, that I spotted my father's sedan pulling into the parking lot. My heart jumped to my throat as he parked a few spaces away and got out, his expression unreadable. Jack, hop in, I said quickly. We need to get home for dinner. But it was too late. My father had spotted us and was walking over, his hands in the pockets of his jacket, his shoulders hunched against the November chill. Grandpa, Jack exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. My father's stern expression softened as he approached. Hey, sport. Good practice? Jack nodded eagerly. I scored 2 goals. Did you come to watch me? A flash of guilt crossed my father's face. Not today, buddy. I just needed to talk to your mom for a minute. I helped Jack into the car and handed him his tablet. "How about you watch a video while I chat with Grandpa? Just for a few minutes." Once Jack was settled, I turned to face my father, crossing my arms against both the cold and the conversation I knew was coming. "Dad, this is a surprise." He glanced at the car, then back at me. "Can we talk? Privately?" I shook my head. "I need to get Jack home for dinner. Whatever you want to say, you can say here." He frowned, clearly unhappy with the setting, but pressed on. "Your mother tells me you're hosting Thanksgiving at your place." "That's right." "And you've invited Mark." I nodded. "I have." My father sighed, his breath making a small cloud in the cold air. "Emma, what are you trying to prove here?" The question caught me off guard. "Prove? I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm having Thanksgiving dinner with people who want to spend the holiday with us. It's pretty straightforward. You know what I mean. This alternative Thanksgiving. It feels like you're trying to make a point." I stared at him, suddenly angry. "The point was made when Mom uninvited me from the family gathering. I'm simply making other plans," as she suggested. "Your mother didn't uninvite you," he said, using air quotes around the word. "She suggested that everyone might benefit from a break, a chance to cool down." "From what exactly? What terrible thing did I do that requires a cooling down? Period?" I could hear my voice rising and made an effort to lower it, not wanting Jack to overhear. My father looked uncomfortable. "You know how you've been, Emma. The comments, the criticism, the way you make Olivia feel every time she visits your house." He gestured vaguely, as if indicating the mansion itself was an affront. "My house," I repeated slowly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're all so fixated on where I live, as if choosing to restore a historic home somehow makes me a bad person." "It's not the house itself," he clarified, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's the attitude, the showing off, the way you've changed since you moved in there." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Dad, Nathan and I bought a neglected property and restored it. We've worked incredibly hard to create a beautiful home for our family. Why is that a problem?" "It's not a problem if you don't make it one," he said cryptically. "What does that even mean?" He sighed again, clearly frustrated that I wasn't understanding whatever point he was trying to make. "It means you don't have to rub people's faces in it. The magazine features, the client events, the way you're always talking about your latest renovation project." I stared at him, genuinely baffled. "You mean my career, my work, the thing I've spent years building that supports my family? I'm supposed to. What? Pretend it doesn't exist to make everyone else comfortable?" "No one's saying that," he backpedaled. "Just, there's a way to be successful without making others feel small." The irony was almost laughable. For years, my parents had dismissed my interior design work as a little hobby. When I'd struggled in the early days, working long hours for minimal pay, there had been no support, no encouragement. "Get a real job," my father had advised when I'd mentioned the challenges of building a client base. Now that I was successful, now that my little hobby had turned into a thriving business that allowed us to buy and restore our dream home, suddenly I was supposed to downplay it? To hide my achievements so that Olivia, with her ready-made life funded by Greg's family wealth, wouldn't feel small? "I'm not going to apologize for being proud of what Nathan and I have built," I said firmly. "And I'm not going to pretend to be less than I am to make anyone else comfortable." My father's expression hardened. "This is exactly the attitude your mother is talking about. This defiance." "It's not defiance to refuse to be diminished, Dad." We stood facing each other in the parking lot, at an impasse. In the car, Jack had grown restless, tapping on the window to get my attention. "I need to go," I said. "Jack's hungry and it's getting cold." My father nodded stiffly. Just think about what I said, Emma. Family should come first. All this, he gestured vaguely again, isn't worth losing your family over. As he turned to walk back to his car, I called after him. Dad? He paused, looking back at me. Jack has another soccer game next Saturday at 10. He'd love it if you and Mom came to watch. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by something softer. I'll check our calendar, he said, and then he was gone, sliding into his sedan, and driving away without a backward glance. I stood watching until his car disappeared from view, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within me. Anger at his assumptions, hurt at the casual way he'd dismissed my work and home, but also a tiny, persistent flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward that didn't require me to make myself smaller. When I finally got into the car, Jack immediately bombarded me with questions. What did Grandpa want? Is he coming to our house? Will he be at Thanksgiving? Can we go to his house soon? I started the engine, buying myself a moment to think. How much should I tell? Him? How did I explain family dynamics to a 6-year-old without burdening him with adult problems? Grandpa just wanted to say hi, I said finally, and I invited him to your soccer game next Saturday. Awesome, Jack exclaimed. Will he bring cookies like last time? I smiled despite myself. My father had a tradition of bringing chocolate, chip cookies to the kids' events, store-bought but presented as if they were a special treat he'd selected just for them. It was one of his small kindnesses that sometimes made me forget the larger hurts. Maybe, I said. We'll have to see. As we drove home, Jack chattered about soccer and cookies and a science project he was working on. Normal, everyday things. That anchored me back to what really mattered. The mansion, as my family insisted on calling it, came into view as we turned onto our street. In the gathering dusk, with lights glowing warmly from its windows, it looked like something from a storybook. Pumpkins lined the front steps. The kids' bicycles leaned against the porch railing. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway. Not a showpiece. A home. Our home. Nathan was in the kitchen when we arrived, helping Lily with a craft project that seemed to involve an improbable amount of glitter. Daddy, I scored 2 goals, Jack announced as he burst through the door. And Grandpa came to talk to Mommy. Nathan's eyebrows shot up, but he kept his voice casual. That's great about the goals, buddy. Why don't you go wash up for dinner? While I help Mom with the groceries? Once the kids were out of earshot, he turned to me. Your father showed up at soccer practice? I nodded, filling him in on the conversation as I unpacked the groceries I'd picked up before Jack's practice. So basically, he came to tell you to stop being so successful because it makes Olivia feel bad, Nathan summarized, handing me a glass of wine he'd poured while I was talking. I took a grateful sip. Pretty much. Oh, and to guilt me about dividing the family by having Thanksgiving here. Nathan leaned against the counter, watching me. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question as I put away the last of the groceries. Honestly, less upset than I expected. It's like, I finally see the pattern clearly. They're not going to change. They're never going to validate my choices or celebrate my success. And that's okay. I don't need them to anymore. Nathan pulled me into a hug, his arms warm and solid around me. I'm proud of you, he murmured into my hair. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. I invited them to Jack's game next weekend. He pulled back slightly to look at me. Really? I nodded. They're still his grandparents, and I'm not going to be the one who cuts that connection, even if they're being difficult about everything else. Nathan smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. You're a better person than I am. Or just more stubborn, I replied, returning his smile. I refuse to play by their rules anymore. I'm writing my own. That night, as I checked on the kids before bed, I found Lily sitting up, her nightlight casting a soft glow across her room. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. She shook her head. "I was thinking about Thanksgiving." "What about it, sweetie?" She fidgeted with her blanket. "Sophie says they're having Thanksgiving at Grandma's house, but we're having it here. She doesn't understand why we can't all be together." I sighed, trying to find the right words. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that are complicated. It doesn't mean we don't love each other. It just means we need a little space sometimes. Lily considered this. "Like when Jack and I fight and I go to my room to calm down?" "Something like that," I agreed. "But you know what? We're going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving here, with Uncle Mark and some of our closest friends. And maybe next year we can all be together again." "I hope so," she said, yawning. "I miss Grandma's pie, but I like that we get to decorate our house our way." I bent to kiss her forehead. "Me too, sweetie. Now try to get some sleep, okay?" As I turned out her light and closed her door, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We were forging a new path, creating new traditions, showing our children that it was possible to set boundaries without burning bridges. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. I finalized the menu, ordered the turkey from a local farm, and started preparing dishes that could be made ahead of time. Nathan cleaned out the guest room for Uncle Mark and helped the kids create a Welcome to Thanksgiving banner to hang in the entryway. My parents didn't come to Jack's soccer game that Saturday. I hadn't really expected them to, but the disappointment on Jack's face when he scanned the sidelines at the end of the match and didn't see them tightened something in my chest. "Maybe they were busy," he said as we walked to the car, his voice small. "Maybe," I agreed, ruffling his hair. "But guess what? Uncle Mark just texted. He's arriving Tuesday instead of Wednesday, which means you'll have an extra day to show him your new video game." Jack's face lit up, his disappointment momentarily forgotten. "Awesome. Can he sleep in my room? I can put my sleeping bag on the floor." I laughed. "We have a perfectly good guest room, but I'm sure he'd love to play games with you." As I drove home, I found myself thinking about Uncle Mark. My father's younger brother had always been the family outlier, unmarried, a professor of literature, at a small college in Boston, with a love of art and travel that my practical parents found baffling. He'd always been kind to me, bringing books that sparked my imagination when I was a child, showing genuine interest in my design work as I grew older. Unlike my parents, he'd never made me feel like my creative pursuits were frivolous or insignificant. I couldn't remember the last time he'd missed Thanksgiving at my parents' house. For him to choose to come to our gathering instead was a significant statement, one that clearly hadn't gone unnoticed by my parents. That evening, I received a text from my mother. "Mark tells us he's going to your house for Thanksgiving. I hope you're happy about dividing the family this way." I stared at the message, torn between anger and disbelief. Was she really blaming me for Uncle Mark's decision? A decision he'd made after she uninvited me from the family gathering. I started typing several responses, deleting each one before settling on, "Uncle Mark made his own choice. Everyone is welcome at our table." Her reply was swift. "What is that supposed to mean?" I took a deep breath, then typed, "It means exactly what it says. If you and Dad want to join us for Thanksgiving, you're welcome to come." There was a long pause before her response appeared. "After everything, now you're inviting us to your house? For your alternative Thanksgiving?" The tone was classic mom, taking my olive branch and turning it into a weapon. But I refused to be baited. "Yes, Mom, that's what family does. The invitation is open if you change your mind." I set my phone down, not expecting a reply. And I was right. None came. But the exchange left me feeling strangely empowered. I had extended the invitation sincerely, knowing they wouldn't accept it. I had taken the high road, refusing to engage in the drama. I had set my boundaries while still leaving the door open. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt completely at peace with my choices. Uncle Mark arrived on Tuesday afternoon, his compact car laden with luggage and gifts. The kids swarmed him the moment he stepped through the door, chattering excitedly about the plans they'd made for his visit. Whoa, let the poor man breathe, Nathan laughed, helping Mark with his bags. He's here for 3 days. You've got plenty of time to tell him everything. Mark hugged me warmly. The place looks amazing, Emma. The photos don't do it justice. I beamed, pleased by his genuine admiration. Wait until you see what we did with the library. Those built-in bookcases we salvaged from the old university building turned out perfectly. As we gave him the tour, Mark's appreciation was evident in his thoughtful questions and attentive observations. Unlike my parents and sister, who had toured the house with tight smiles and comments about all this space for just 4 people, Mark seemed to truly understand what we'd accomplished. You've brought this old beauty back to life, he said as we stood in the library, running his hand along the polished wood of the bookcase. Not just restored it, but made it a home again. That's no small feat. His words touched something deep within me. Yes, that was exactly what we'd done. Not created a showpiece to impress others, but breathed life back into a neglected treasure, turning it into a place where our family could grow and thrive. That evening, after the kids were in bed, the 3 of us sat in the library with glasses of the bourbon Mark had brought, an expensive single malt that he insisted was for drinking, not saving. So, he said after his first sip, I hear I've caused quite the stir by choosing to spend Thanksgiving here. Nathan and I exchanged glances. Mom wasn't happy, I admitted. She accused me of dividing the family. Mark rolled his eyes. Classic Patricia. She uninvites you, then plays the victim when there are consequences. I hesitated, not wanting to put him in an awkward position. You didn't have to choose sides, you know. I would have understood if you'd gone to their house as usual. He looked at me over the rim of his glass. I didn't choose sides, Emma. I chose to spend the holiday with people who make me feel welcome and valued. It just so happens that's you, not my brother and his wife. His frankness surprised me. Uncle Mark had always been diplomatic about family tensions. Has it always been like this? I asked. The favoritism, I mean. Was I just too close to see it clearly? Mark considered the question, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Robert and I grew up in a home where there were very clear expectations about how things should be done. Follow the rules, don't rock the boat. Appearance matters above all. Else. Nathan and I nodded, recognizing the values that still guided my parents' lives. I rejected that early on, Mark continued. Chose a different path, moved away, built a life that made sense to me, even if it baffled them. He smiled ruefully. They've never approved of my choices, but they've learned to tolerate them because I don't seek their validation. He leaned forward slightly. But you, Emma, you tried to play by their rules and forge your own path at the same time. You sought their approval while also building something that didn't fit their narrow definition of success. And that's why Olivia is the favorite, I said softly. Because she follows the script perfectly. Mark nodded. Olivia gives them exactly what they want: conformity, predictability, the appearance of perfect family harmony. You challenge them just by being yourself, by making choices they wouldn't make. Like buying a rundown mansion and turning it into a showpiece, Nathan added. Exactly, Mark agreed. In their world, success is acceptable only if it follows the approved path. Your success, creative, unconventional, earned through talent rather than connections, doesn't compute in their worldview, Mark continued. It makes them uncomfortable because it challenges their assumptions about how life should work. I let his words sink in, feeling a strange mix of sadness and clarity. So there's nothing I could have done differently? Nothing that would have made them see me the way they see Olivia? Mark's expression softened. Short of becoming a completely different person? No, Emma. and that would have been a tragedy, because the person you are is pretty remarkable." Nathan raised his glass in agreement. "I'll drink to that." Later that night, after Mark had retired to the guest room and Nathan was checking on the kids, I found myself alone in the library. Again. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books we'd collected over the years, thinking about what Mark had said. All this time, I'd been trying to earn approval that was never going to come. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because what I valued fundamentally differed from what my parents and sister valued. The realization was both painful and liberating. My phone buzzed with a text, startling me from my thoughts. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. "Just heard Uncle Mark is staying with you for Thanksgiving. Mom is devastated. You've really gone too far this time." I stared at the message, a familiar mixture of guilt and indignation rising within me. The old Emma would have immediately called to apologize, to explain, to try to smooth things over. The old Emma would have absorbed the blame to keep the peace. But I wasn't that person anymore. I typed a simple response. Mark made his own choice, as adults do. Her reply came almost instantly. "You know exactly what you did. Don't play innocent." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't have to engage. I didn't have to defend myself. I didn't have to prove anything. "Good night, Olivia," I wrote, and then silenced my phone. When I looked up, Nathan was standing in the doorway watching me, a knowing expression on his face. "Olivia?" he guessed. I nodded, setting my phone face down on the side table. Apparently, I've devastated my mother by stealing Uncle Mark for Thanksgiving. Nathan crossed the room and pulled me to my feet, wrapping me in a hug. "You okay?" I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I really am." And it was true. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt at peace with the situation. I had stopped trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. I had stopped chasing approval that would never come. I had stopped diminishing myself to make others comfortable. It felt like freedom. The next day, Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, brought a flurry of activity. I woke early to start the preparations that couldn't be done ahead of time. The turkey needed to be picked up from the farm. The fresh flowers I'd ordered for the table arrangements were being delivered. The guest rooms needed final touches for the friends who would be staying overnight. Uncle Mark proved to be an unexpectedly helpful assistant, taking the kids to pick up the turkey while I directed the flour delivery and made pie crusts. When they returned, he kept Lily and Jack entertained with stories and games while Nathan and I tackled the more complicated cooking preparations. By mid-afternoon, the house was filled with the rich aroma of simmering stock for gravy, baking bread, and the cranberry sauce I'd made from scratch. The dining room table was set with our best china and crystal, the place cards Lily had made, positioned perfectly at each setting. Everything was coming together exactly as I'd envisioned. I was checking the final shopping list for any forgotten items when the doorbell rang. Wiping my hands on a towel, I went to answer it, expecting it to be the wine delivery I'd scheduled. Instead, I found Carol Johnson standing on my doorstep, a glass baking dish in her hands. "Carol," I said, surprised. "This is unexpected." She smiled uncertainly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I made my sweet potato casserole. Your mother mentioned it was always your favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. It was true. Carol's sweet potato casserole, with its crunchy pecan topping and hint of maple, had been the highlight of many Thanksgiving meals at my parents' house. "That's incredibly thoughtful," I managed finally. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at her car. "I don't want to disturb your preparations. I know you must be busy." "Not too busy for a cup of coffee," I assured her, stepping back to open the door wider. "Please come in." Carol followed me into the house, her eyes widening as she took in the soaring ceilings of the entry hall, The elegant staircase with its newly restored banister, the glimpse of the library through an open doorway. "Oh, Emma," she breathed. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures in that magazine." I smiled, genuinely pleased by her admiration. "Thank you. It's been a labor of love." I led her to the kitchen, where Uncle Mark was supervising Lily and Jack as they decorated. Cookies, a task that had resulted in more sprinkles on the floor than on the actual cookies. "Carol, you remember my Uncle Mark," I said. "And these are my children, Lily and Jack." Mark greeted her warmly while the kids waved sticky hands, too absorbed in their decorating to pay much attention to the visitor. "Can I get you some coffee? Or tea?" I offered, taking the casserole dish from her hands and placing it carefully on the counter. "Coffee would be lovely," she said, settling onto one of the bar stools at the island. As I prepared the coffee, I could feel Carol's eyes on me, curious and assessing. We'd known each other for most of my life. She and my mother had been friends since college, but we'd never had a particularly close relationship of our own. "The house looks wonderful," she said as I handed her a mug. "You've done an amazing job with the renovation." "Thank you. It's been quite the project, but we're almost finished now. Just a few small details left." She nodded, sipping her coffee. "Your mother showed me the feature in Architectural Digest. She was very proud, though she might not have said so to you." I raised an eyebrow, doubtful. My mother had barely acknowledged the magazine article, changing the subject when I'd mentioned it. Carol seemed to read my skepticism. "I know things have been strained between you lately. That's partly why I wanted to stop by." I tensed, bracing myself for another attempt at guilting me into reconciliation. "I'm not here to take sides," she continued quickly, "or to try to fix things. I've known your family a long time, Emma. I've watched you grow up, establish your career, become a mother yourself, and I've seen patterns repeat that maybe aren't visible to those inside them." I glanced at Mark, who was listening while pretending not to, then back at Carol. "What kind of patterns?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Your mother and Olivia are very similar, in temperament, in outlook, in the way they move through the world. They understand each other instinctively." I nodded. This wasn't news to me. "You've always been different," Carol continued. "More like your grandmother, creative, independent-minded, seeing possibilities where others see problems. Your mother never quite understood that about you, just as she never quite understood it about her own mother." This was unexpected. I'd adored my grandmother, my mother's mother, who had died when I was in college. She'd been the one who encouraged my interest in design, who taught me to sew and paint, who told me stories about renovating her own first home in the 1950s. I never thought about it that way, I admitted. I just assumed Mom preferred Olivia, because she was easier, more compliant. Carol smiled sadly. "It's not about preference, not really. It's about understanding. Your mother and Olivia speak the same language. You and she never have." I considered this, turning the idea over in my mind. It didn't erase the hurt of years of unequal treatment, but it offered a new perspective, a different frame through which to view the family dynamics. "That doesn't excuse the way they've treated Emma," Mark interjected, unable to remain silent any longer. "Understanding someone doesn't give you the right to diminish them." Carol nodded. "You're right, of course. I'm not excusing anyone's behavior, just offering a perspective that might make it a little easier to bear." I studied her face, searching for any hint of manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only genuine concern. "Thank you for the casserole," I said finally, "and for coming by. It means a lot." "Will you be at Patricia's tomorrow?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, we're hosting our own gathering here." I thought as much. She finished her coffee and stood. "Well, I should let you get back to your preparations. Thank you for the coffee." As I walked her to the door, she paused, turning to face me. "For what it's worth, Emma, I think what you've created here, this home, your business, your family, it's remarkable. Some people might not understand it or know how to value it properly, but that doesn't diminish its worth. Unexpectedly, tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you, Carol. That means more than you know. After she left, I returned to the kitchen to find Mark smiling at me. What? I asked, picking up Carol's empty mug. Nothing, he said, but his expression remained thoughtful, just thinking that sometimes support comes from unexpected places. I looked at the sweet potato casserole sitting on my counter, a peace offering, a connection to holidays past, a gesture of kindness from someone I'd never considered an ally. I guess it does, I agreed. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Nathan's colleague James and his wife Sarah arrived in the late afternoon, bringing with them a selection of wines and their genuine excitement about spending the holiday with us. My friend Diane and her son came shortly after, Diane immediately rolling up her sleeves to help with the remaining cooking, while her son joined Lily and Jack in the backyard. By evening, the house was filled with conversation and laughter, the kind of warm, relaxed atmosphere I'd always hoped to create in our home. As I moved between the kitchen and dining room, putting final touches on the table settings and checking the menu one last time, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I'd expected to have, but somehow it felt more right, more authentic than any holiday gathering I could remember. After dinner, a casual meal of lasagna that Nathan had prepared while I focused on the next days. The adults gathered in the library with glasses of wine while the children watched a movie in the family room. I have to say, Emma, your home is even more stunning than Nathan described, Sarah said, looking around appreciatively. Those built-ins are spectacular. Thank you, I smiled. We found them at a salvage yard. They were being removed from an old library that was being demolished. It took weeks to restore them, but it was worth it. That's what I love about your design style, Diane chimed in. You see the potential in things other people would discard? Like that coffee table in my living room. Who else would have looked at a battered old factory cart and envisioned the centerpiece of a room? I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine I was sipping. These people, my friends, my chosen family, they saw me. They understood what I valued and why. They appreciated what I'd created without jealousy or resentment. Mark caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass slightly, as if acknowledging my thoughts. I returned the gesture, feeling grateful for his presence, for his unwavering support. As the evening wound down and our guests retired to their rooms, I found myself alone in the kitchen, doing one final check of the preparations for the morning. The turkey was brining, the pies were baked, the vegetables were prepped. Everything was ready. Nathan found me there, leaning against the counter, lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sliding an arm around my waist. I leaned into him, comforted by his familiar warmth. Just thinking about how different this Thanksgiving is from what I expected. Better, in a way I didn't anticipate. Because you're not walking on eggshells? Not worrying about saying the wrong thing or earning your mother's approval? I nodded. Partly that, but also because it feels more authentic. Like we're creating something that truly reflects who we are and what we value. Nathan kissed the top of my head. That's what home is supposed to be, a reflection of the people who live in it. I thought about that as we made our final rounds, checking that doors were locked and lights were off. Our home, this beautiful, imperfect, constantly evolving space we'd created, it wasn't just a house. It was an expression of our values, our tastes, our vision for our life together. No wonder my parents and Olivia had reacted so strongly to it. It wasn't just that the house was large or expensive or featured in magazines. It was that it represented a vision of success they didn't share. A set of priorities they didn't understand. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a new sense of peace. I couldn't make my family understand or appreciate me, but I could surround myself with people who did. I could create a home and a life that reflected my truest self. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting long shadows across the wooden floors. I woke early, before the rest of the household, and padded downstairs to start the coffee and check on the turkey. The quiet of the morning felt sacred somehow, a peaceful interlude before the bustle of the day began. I moved through the rooms of our home, making small adjustments, straightening a pillow here, repositioning a candle there, taking pleasure in the beauty we'd created. When I reached the dining room, I paused to admire the table we'd set the day before. The antique china gleamed in the morning light. The crystal glasses caught the sun, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Lily's handmade place cards added a touch of whimsy, a reminder that this was a family gathering, not a photo shoot for a magazine. I was so absorbed in the moment that I didn't hear Nathan approach until his arm slid around my waist from behind. "Happy Thanksgiving," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. I leaned back against him, savoring the quiet intimacy of the moment. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Nervous?" he asked. I considered the question. Was I nervous? About the cooking? The hosting, the gathering of friends and family in our home for the first time? No, I realized, surprised by my own answer. Not at all. This feels right. He squeezed me gently before releasing me. "Need help with breakfast? The kids will be up soon, demanding pumpkin pancakes." I laughed. "The batter's already mixed, just needs to be cooked." The morning unfolded exactly as I'd hoped, relaxed, joyful, filled with small moments of connection. Pumpkin pancakes for breakfast, eaten in pajamas. The Macy's parade on television, with the kids exclaiming over each giant balloon. Nathan and Mark setting up the projector in the family room for the football games that would play throughout the day. By mid-morning, the serious cooking had begun. The turkey went into the oven, filling the house with its rich aroma. Diane and Sarah joined me in the kitchen, each of us taking charge of different dishes, working in a comfortable rhythm as we chatted and laughed. It was nothing like the tense, performance-oriented cooking sessions at my mother's house, where every dish had to be perfect, where every deviation from tradition was met with criticism. This was collaborative, creative, fun. Around noon, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello? Emma? It's Greg, Olivia's husband." I froze, caught off guard. Greg and I had always had a cordial, if distant, relationship. We'd never had a one-on-one conversation that wasn't about logistics or the children. "Greg, hi, is everything okay?" There was a pause, and I could hear the sounds of a household in the background. Dishes clattering, voices talking. "Yeah, everything's fine. He lowered his voice slightly. "I wanted to call and wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and to apologize for how things have gone down." I was so surprised I couldn't immediately respond. "I know Olivia and your parents have been hard on you," he continued. "About the house, about standing up for yourself. I just want you to know that not everyone feels that way." I found my voice finally. "Thank you, Greg. That means a lot." "The girls miss Lily and Jack," he added. "Maybe when things cool down, we could arrange a play date? Just the kids?" I felt a rush of gratitude for this unexpected olive branch. I'd like that. The kids shouldn't have to bear the weight of adult disagreements. Exactly. There was another pause, and I could hear someone, probably Olivia, calling his name in the background. "I should go, but I wanted you to know, well, what I said. Happy Thanksgiving, Emma." "Happy Thanksgiving, Greg, and thank you for calling." After we hung up, I stood still for a moment, processing the conversation. It was a small thing, perhaps, a brief phone call, a simple acknowledgement. but it felt significant. A crack in the united front my family had presented. A hint that perhaps, eventually, there might be a path forward. I was still thinking about it when the doorbell rang an hour later. Assuming it was Nathan's cousin Tyler and his husband Michael, who had texted that they were running late, I hurried to answer it, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Tyler and Michael standing on my doorstep. It was my parents. My father looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, his expression guarded. My mother stood slightly behind him, clutching, her purse to her chest like a shield. "Mom, Dad," I managed, struggling to keep the shock from my voice. "This is unexpected." My father cleared his throat. "We were driving by and saw all the cars. Quite the gathering you're having." I raised an eyebrow. My parents lived on the opposite side of town. They hadn't been driving by. They had come deliberately. "Yes," I said simply. "We have a full house for Thanksgiving." An awkward silence fell, none of us quite sure how to proceed. Then, from behind me, I heard Lily's voice. "Grandma? Grandpa?" She pushed past me to the doorway, her face lighting up with genuine delight. "You came?" My mother's expression softened as she looked at her granddaughter. "Hello, sweetheart." Lily turned to me, her eyes shining. "Can Grandma and Grandpa stay for Thanksgiving, Mommy? Please?" I looked at my daughter's hopeful face, then at my parents' uncertain expressions. This was the moment, the fork in the road. I could send them away, maintaining the boundaries I'd established. Or I could open the door wider, literally and figuratively, and see where it led. "Of course they can stay," I heard myself say, "if they'd like to." My father's eyes met mine, a question in them. I held his gaze steadily, my expression neutral, but not unwelcoming. "We don't want to intrude," my mother began, but Lily was already tugging on her hand. "You're not intruding, Grandma. We have plenty of room. I made place cards for everyone, but I can make 2 more. Come see our decorations." And just like that, the decision was made. My parents stepped into our home, shedding their coats, allowing Lily to lead them into the living room where the other guests were gathered. I stood in the entryway for a moment, watching as Jack spotted them and ran over for hugs, as Uncle Mark greeted his brother with a raised eyebrow but a genuine handshake. As Nathan emerged from the kitchen with a look of surprise that quickly shifted to cautious welcome. This wasn't how I had imagined the day unfolding. It wasn't part of the careful plan I'd made. But maybe that was okay. Maybe sometimes the best moments were the unplanned ones, the unexpected turns in the road. I took a deep breath and followed my family into the living room, ready to face whatever came next. The initial awkwardness was palpable as my parents were introduced to our friends and settled into the living room with glasses of wine. My mother perched stiffly on the edge of the sofa, taking careful sips and glancing around with barely concealed curiosity. My father stood by the fireplace making polite but stilted conversation with James about the football game playing silently on the screen. I busied myself in the kitchen, checking the turkey and finishing the side dishes, giving myself time to process their unexpected arrival. Nathan found me there a few minutes later, his expression questioning. "You okay with this?" he asked quietly. I nodded slowly. "I think so. It's better for the kids, at least. And maybe it's a step in the right direction." He studied my face. "Just remember, you don't have to prove anything to them. This is our home, our gathering. You've created something beautiful here, regardless of whether they can see it or appreciate it." I squeezed his hand gratefully. "I know. Thank you for reminding me." When I returned to the living room with a tray of appetizers, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Lily was showing my mother her place card designs, chattering excitedly about how she'd chosen different fall colors for each person. My father was engaged in what appeared to be an actual conversation with Mark and Tyler, his posture more relaxed than it had been earlier. "These are lovely, Lily," my mother was saying, examining the hand-painted cards. "You're quite the artist." Lily beamed. "Mommy says I get my creativity from her, and from great-grandma." My mother's eyes flickered to mine over Lily's head, something unreadable in her expression. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I suppose you do." It wasn't an effusive compliment or a dramatic reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, small, tentative but real, of the connection between us, of the creative lineage that flowed from my grandmother through me to my daughter. I held her gaze for a moment, then smiled slightly before moving on to offer the appetizers to the other guests. Baby steps, I reminded myself. Baby steps were still steps. As the afternoon progressed, something unexpected happened. My parents began to relax. Maybe it was the wine, or the genuine warmth of our friends, or simply the fact that the dreaded confrontation they'd perhaps anticipated hadn't materialized. Whatever the reason, the rigid formality they'd arrived with gradually gave way to something more natural. My father found common ground with Michael over a shared interest in historical architecture, the two of them deep in conversation about the original details we'd preserved in the house. My mother, after initially hovering on the periphery of conversations, was drawn into a discussion with Diane about community garden initiatives, and I, moving between groups, adjusting a place setting here, checking the turkey there, found myself observing them with a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the gathering hadn't descended into tension or conflict. Surprise at how naturally they fit into the environment I'd created. And a lingering wariness, a protective instinct that reminded me not to expect too much, not to mistake a pleasant afternoon for a fundamental change. When it was time to sit down for dinner, I held my breath as everyone found their seats. We hadn't anticipated my parents' arrival, but Lily had made good on her promise to create place cards for them, positioning them at the opposite end of the table from Mark and me. A diplomatic choice that gave everyone space. Nathan carved the turkey, which had turned out perfectly golden and juicy. Dishes were passed around. Traditional favorites like mashed potatoes and green bean casserole alongside new additions like the roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon that Sarah had brought, and the wild rice stuffing that was Mark's contribution. And in the center of the table, somewhat incongruously but touchingly, sat Carol's sweet potato casserole, a bridge between past Thanksgivings and this new one we were creating. As glasses were raised for a toast, I looked around at the faces, gathered at our table, friends and family, some known for years, others newer additions to our lives. All here, sharing this moment, in the home Nathan and I had created. "To new traditions," Nathan said, lifting his glass, "and to the people who make a house a home." "To new traditions," everyone echoed, glasses clinking, and as I caught my mother's eye across the table, I saw something in her expression that I couldn't quite name. Not quite approval, not quite understanding, but perhaps a step toward both. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I had planned, but maybe it was better, messier, more complicated, more real. And for that, I was truly thankful. Dinner progressed with a surprising ease, conversation flowing more naturally than I would have expected. The blend of friends and family created a buffer that seemed to soften the edges of old tensions. James told entertaining stories about tech startup failures that had everyone laughing. Diane shared updates about her community theater production. The children, excited by the unexpected presence of their grandparents, were on their best behavior, though Jack couldn't resist occasionally flicking a pea toward his sister when he thought no one was looking. I found myself relaxing as the meal continued, the knot of anxiety in my chest gradually loosening. This wasn't the confrontation I had feared, nor was it the performance-oriented gathering that Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been, with my mother stressing over every detail and my father evaluating each dish with his discerning palate. This was something new, imperfect, a bit chaotic, but warm and genuine. I was so caught up in the pleasant surprise of it all that I almost missed the moment when my mother, after taking a bite of Carol's sweet potato casserole, looked directly at me and said, "This is lovely, Emma. Different from the recipe Carol usually makes, but very good." I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "It is Carol's recipe. She brought it over yesterday." Something flickered across my mother's face. Surprise, confusion, perhaps a touch of hurt. "Carol was here? At your house?" I nodded, suddenly, aware of the slight tension that had entered her voice. "She stopped by while we were preparing. Brought the casserole as a gift." "I see." My mother took another small bite, her expression unreadable. How thoughtful of her. I could sense the unasked questions hovering in the air between us. Why had Carol, her friend for decades, visited my home without telling her? What had we discussed? Had I shared details of our family disagreement? Before I could decide how to respond, Uncle Mark smoothly changed the subject, asking Tyler about his recent work trip to Europe. The moment passed, but I caught Nathan's eye across the table, his slight nod acknowledging what had just happened. Another piece of the puzzle had shifted. The neat boundaries my mother had always maintained, her friends, her domain, her control over family narratives, were blurring. And I could see that it unsettled her in a way that was both revealing and a little sad. After the main course, as we cleared plates to make room for dessert, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my father. He had offered to help carry dishes, an unprecedented gesture that I'd accepted with surprise. He stood awkwardly by the sink, holding a stack of dinner plates, seemingly unsure what to do with them. "Just leave them on the counter," I said. "We'll load the dishwasher later." He set them down carefully, then leaned against the counter, watching as I transferred pies from the cooling rack to serving plates. "You've done well here, Emma," he said suddenly. I glanced up, startled by the unexpected comment. "The house?" he clarified, gesturing vaguely to encompass our surroundings. "The renovation, it's impressive." Coming from my father, this was high praise indeed. He had always been sparing with compliments, especially regarding my creative endeavors. "Thank you," I said simply, not wanting to make too much of the moment, but also not willing to diminish it. He nodded, his gaze moving around the kitchen with its restored cabinetry, high-end appliances, and the original tin ceiling we'd painstakingly restored. "You've always had an eye for potential, even as a kid. Remember that ratty old dollhouse your grandmother gave you?" I smiled at the memory. I spent an entire summer refinishing it, painted every room, made tiny furniture out of scraps, sewed little curtains. "Your mother thought it was a waste of time, said we should just buy you a new one." He shook his head. "But you were determined to make that old thing beautiful again." "And I did," I said softly. "Yes." His eyes met mine, something like recognition in them. "You did." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of this small connection, this acknowledgement of who I had always been, settling between us. Then he cleared his throat, the moment passing. "Need help with anything else?" I handed him a stack of dessert plates. "You can take these out if you don't mind. We'll bring the pies in a minute." As he left, I felt a strange mix of emotions: gratitude for the small olive branch he'd extended, sadness for all the years he hadn't seen or valued, this core part of me, and a cautious hope that perhaps something was shifting, however slightly. When I returned to the dining room with pies, classic pumpkin, apple crumble, and the chocolate pecan that was Nathan's favorite, I found an animated discussion underway about holiday traditions. In my family, we always went around the table and said what we were thankful for, Sarah was explaining. It sounds cheesy, but it was actually really nice. We did that too, Diane nodded. Though with my brothers, it usually devolved into jokes by the end. "We've never done that," Jack said, looking at me curiously. "Can we, Mom?" I hesitated, glancing at my parents. Expressions of genuine emotion had never been encouraged at our family gatherings. My mother, in particular, had always been uncomfortable with anything that might lead to vulnerability or unpredictability. But this wasn't their gathering. It was mine. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, setting down the pies. "Who wants to start?" To my surprise, it was Uncle Mark who volunteered. "I'm thankful for unexpected invitations," he said, his eyes twinkling as he looked at me. "And for the courage it takes to create new traditions." One by one, our guests shared their gratitude for friendship, for health, for opportunities to grow. The children offered sweetly simple thanks for toys and games and Mommy's apple pie. Nathan expressed gratitude for our home and family in a way that brought tears to my eyes. When it came to my mother's turn, I braced myself, unsure what to expect. She sat very straight in her chair, her hands folded precisely in her lap. "I'm thankful for family," she said carefully, "and for second chances." Her eyes met mine briefly, and though her expression remained composed, I caught a glimpse of something I rarely saw there. Uncertainty, perhaps even vulnerability. My father simply echoed her sentiment about family, adding, "And for good, food shared in good company." When it was my turn, I took a deep breath, looking around at the faces gathered at our table. Friends who had become family who were trying to bridge old gaps, children watching and learning from every interaction. "I'm thankful for this moment," I said simply, "for all of you, for the journey that brought us here, even the difficult parts, and for the courage to be authentic, even when it's hard." Nathan reached for my hand under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. Across from us, I saw my mother's posture soften almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. There were no tearful apologies or profound declarations of change. But in that moment, sharing dessert around our dining room table, something subtle shifted, a door opening just a crack, letting in the possibility of a different kind of relationship, a different kind of understanding. After dessert, the gathering naturally dispersed throughout the house. The men gravitated toward the library where the football game was playing. The children disappeared upstairs to show their cousins Lily's rock collection. Diane and Sarah offered to tackle the dishes, waving away my protests. I found myself on the back porch with my mother, both of us bundled in sweaters against the November chill, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid shades of orange and pink. We hadn't planned this moment alone together, but somehow it had happened. And now we stood side by side, the silence between us neither comfortable nor hostile, just waiting. "Your home is beautiful, Emma," she said finally. "You've done a remarkable job with the renovation." "Thank you," I replied, my breath visible in the cold air. "It's been a labor of love." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I suppose that's always been the difference between us. You see challenges as labors of love. I see them as problems to solve." I glanced at her, surprised by this moment of self-awareness. My mother had never been one for introspection, at least not out loud. "Different approaches, that's all," I offered. "Neither wrong, just different." "Perhaps." She pulled her sweater tighter around herself. "Your grandmother was like you, always seeing beauty in broken things, possibilities where I saw only obstacles. It used to drive me crazy." I smiled slightly. "I remember the arguments you two would have about her collections, her projects." "I never understood it," she admitted. "Why put so much effort into restoring an old table when you could simply buy a new one? Why preserve something broken when you could replace it with something perfect?" "Because perfection isn't always what matters," I said softly. Sometimes it's the history, the character, the journey of bringing something back to life. She was quiet for a long moment. Like this house. Yes, exactly like this house. Another silence fell between us, but it felt different now, less guarded, more thoughtful. "I don't think I'll ever fully understand it," she said finally. "This need of yours to take on these enormous challenges, to pour yourself into these creative projects. But I can see that it fulfills you in a way that other choices wouldn't have." Coming from my mother, this was a monumental acknowledgement. Not approval exactly, but recognition. Recognition that my path, though different from the one she would have chosen for me, was valid, was mine. "Thank you for coming today," I said, my voice rougher than I'd expected. It meant a lot to the kids, and to me. She nodded, her profile sharp against the deepening twilight. "I wasn't sure we'd be welcome, after everything." "Family is always welcome," I said, choosing my words carefully, "as long as there's mutual respect." She turned to look at me then, really look at me, perhaps for the first time in a very long time. "You've become quite formidable, Emma." I smiled slightly. "I've become myself, Mom. That's all." Inside, we could hear laughter from the library, excited chatter from upstairs. Life continuing, relationships evolving, new memories being created even as we stood here, acknowledging old wounds and new boundaries. "We should go in," my mother said finally. "It's getting cold." Nodded, but neither of us moved immediately, both reluctant to end this fragile moment of connection. "This doesn't fix everything," I said quietly. "You know that, right?" "I know," she sighed. "Decades of patterns don't change in a single afternoon." "But it's a start," I offered. "Yes," she agreed. And for the first time that day, she smiled. A small, tentative gesture, but genuine. A start. As we turned to go inside, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Not the euphoria of a perfect resolution, not the vindication of having won some imaginary contest, but something quieter and more valuable. The knowledge that I had stood my ground, maintained my boundaries, and still kept the door open for whatever might come next. Inside, the warmth and light enveloped us. Nathan looked up as we entered, his expression questioning. I gave him a slight nod. "I'm okay," and he smiled, returning his attention to the conversation with my father and James. The evening continued with the pleasant, slightly chaotic energy of a holiday gathering. More pie was served. Coffee was brewed. The children grew increasingly hyper before crashing dramatically on various pieces of furniture. Our guests drifted in and out of conversations, the blend of family and friends creating a buffer that seemed to ease old tensions. Around 7, my parents prepared to leave, declining our offer to stay longer with polite excuses about the drive home and early plans for the next day. I walked them to the door, aware of the watchful eyes of both Nathan and Uncle Mark following our progress. At the threshold, there was an awkward moment, the uncertainty of how to say goodbye after such an unprecedented day. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug presumptuous given our recent history. My father solved the dilemma by placing a hand, briefly on my shoulder. "Thank you for including us today, Emma. It was illuminating." I smiled at his characteristic understatement. "You're welcome." My mother hesitated, then reached out to adjust the collar of my sweater, a familiar maternal gesture that caught me off guard. "Your table was beautiful," she said. "I especially liked the place cards Lily made. Very creative, like her mother." The compliment, small but significant, hung in the air between us. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting it without diminishing it. After they left, I stood for a moment in the open doorway, watching their car disappear down our long driveway. The night was clear and cold, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I felt a presence behind me and turned to find Uncle Mark, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "Well," he said, raising an eyebrow. "That was unexpected." I laughed softly. To put it mildly. "How are you feeling about it?" he asked, studying my face. I considered the question seriously. Cautiously optimistic? It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but it felt like a first step. An acknowledgement, at least, that there might be a path forward. He nodded, taking a sip of his bourbon. "Your mother's never been good at admitting she's wrong, but showing up here today, that was her version of an apology." "I know," I said. "And I appreciate the gesture, but it doesn't erase years of patterns," he finished for me. "Of course not. These things take time if they happen at all." I closed the door against the growing chill, turning back toward the warmth and light of our home. I'm not expecting miracles, just small steps. "Like Thanksgiving dinner," he said with a smile, which, by the way, was excellent. "You've created something beautiful here, Emma. Not just the house, though that's remarkable too, but this gathering, this blend of family and friends, this space where people feel welcome and valued." His words touched something deep within me. "Thank you, Mark, for coming, for supporting us, for seeing me." He clinked his glass against the empty air between us. "To being seen," he said, "and to creating spaces where others can be seen too." Back in the living room, our remaining guests had settled into comfortable conversation, the post-dinner lethargy giving way to a second wind. Diane was showing Sarah photos of her son's art projects on her phone. Tyler and Michael were engaged in an animated discussion with Nathan about renovation challenges. The children had somehow rallied and were playing an increasingly rowdy game of charades in the corner. I slipped back into the flow of the evening, refilling coffee cups, passing around the last slices of pie, joining conversations here and there. But part of me remained slightly detached, observing it all with a newfound clarity. This was what I had always wanted, I realized. Not perfect harmony, not the absence of conflict, but this authentic connection, this space where differences could exist without demanding conformity, this gathering of people who saw and valued each other as they were. Later, after all our guests had departed, Tyler and Michael to a hotel downtown, Diane and her son to their home across town, James and Sarah to the guest room upstairs, Nathan and I sat in the library with Uncle Mark, enjoying a final glass of wine before bed. "I'd say your alternative Thanksgiving was a success," Mark commented, stretching his legs toward the fire. "Even with the surprise additions." Nathan chuckled. "I still can't believe they showed up. The look on your face when you opened the door, Em, priceless." I smiled, remembering my shock at finding my parents on our doorstep. I think we have Lily to thank for salvaging that moment. Her excitement didn't leave much room for awkwardness. "Kids are good that way," Mark nodded. "They cut through the adult nonsense." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The only sounds the crackling of the fire and the distant hum of the dishwasher running its final cycle of the evening. "What happens now?" Nathan asked finally. "With your parents, I mean." I considered the question. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think today was positive, but it doesn't erase the patterns that got us here. It doesn't suddenly make them understand or fully accept who I am and the choices I've made. "But it's a start," Mark said. "Yes," I agreed. "A start. I think the important thing is that I'm not waiting for their approval anymore. I'm not diminishing myself to fit their expectations. I'm living my life, creating my home, building my career, and they can either find a way to accept that or not." Nathan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "That's my girl." "The boundaries stay," I continued, wanting to be clear. The expectation of mutual respect, of equal treatment for our children, of acknowledgement of my work in our home. Those aren't negotiable, but the door is open if they want to walk through it. Mark raised his glass. To healthy boundaries and open doors. Not an easy balance to strike. To boundaries and open doors, Nathan and I echoed, raising our glasses to meet his. Later that night, as I checked on the children before bed, I found Lily awake, sitting up among her pillows with a thoughtful expression on her small face. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. She shook her head. "I was thinking about Thanksgiving." "What about it, sweetie?" She fidgeted with her blanket, gathering her thoughts. "It was nice that Grandma and Grandpa came, but also kind of weird." I smiled at her perceptiveness. "It was a little unexpected, wasn't it?" She nodded. "Are they still mad at us?" The question caught me off guard. How much had she picked up on this observant child of mine? "What makes you think they were mad at us?" I asked carefully. She gave me a look that was far too knowing for her 8 years. "They didn't invite us to their house, and you were sad about it." I took a deep breath, considering how to respond. I didn't want to burden her with adult complexities, but I also didn't want to dismiss her perceptions or lie to her. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that are hard to explain," I said finally. "Grandma and Grandpa and I see some things differently, and we're working on understanding each other better. But nobody is mad at you or Jack. Everyone loves you very much." She thought about this for a moment. "But today was good, right? Because they came to our house, even though they didn't invite us to theirs." "Yes," I agreed. "Today was a good step, a beginning." "And our Thanksgiving was better anyway," she declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "We had maxi, and cheese and 3 kinds of pie." I laughed, leaning forward to kiss her forehead. "We absolutely did. Now try to get some sleep, okay? It's been a big day." She snuggled down into her blankets, already drifting off. "Night, Mommy. I'm thankful for you." "I'm thankful for you too, my love," I whispered. "More than you know." In the hallway, I paused for a moment, overwhelmed by a sudden rush of emotion. The day had been full of unexpected turns, complex feelings, small revelations. But this simple moment with my daughter, this pure expression of love and belonging, this was what mattered most. Whatever happened next with my parents, with the complex web of family relationships and old patterns, I knew that here, in this home we'd created, with these children we were raising to be both kind and strong, I had everything that truly mattered. I made my way downstairs, where Nathan was loading the last of the dishes into the dishwasher. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening. "Kids asleep?" he asked. "Lily just drifting off. Jack was out cold." He nodded, closing the dishwasher and turning to face me. "And how about you? How are you feeling after today?" I moved into his open arms, resting my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Tired, thoughtful, surprisingly peaceful. "No regrets? About letting your parents in?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "It was the right thing to do. Not because they necessarily deserved it, but because it's who I want to be. Someone who can maintain boundaries without closing doors completely." He held me closer, his cheek resting against the top of my head. "I'm proud of you, you know. The way you handled today, the way you've handled everything. It takes a lot of courage to stand up for yourself while still keeping your heart open." I smiled against his chest. "I had a good example. You've never once suggested I cut them off completely, even when they hurt me. You've always encouraged me to find my own way through this, even when it would have been easier to just walk away. Because I know how much family means to you," he said simply. "Even when it's complicated." even when it hurts. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other, the house settling around us after the busy day. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling the few remaining leaves on the trees. But inside was warmth and peace and the deep satisfaction of having created something meaningful together. "Happy Thanksgiving," I murmured. "Happy Thanksgiving," he echoed. "The first of many in our home, I hope." "The first of many," I agreed, and in that moment, I knew it was true. Whatever came next with my parents, whatever path our relationship took from here, we had established something important today. A new tradition, a new way forward, a gathering that reflected who we truly were and what we valued most. In the end, that was something to be truly thankful for. The day after Thanksgiving dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of November morning that invited sleeping in and lazy breakfasts. I woke early despite the temptation to linger under the warm covers, my mind already moving through the day ahead. Uncle Mark would be leaving tomorrow. The Christmas decorations needed to be brought down from the attic. Client emails required responses despite the holiday weekend. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Nathan, and padded downstairs in my robe and slippers. The house was quiet, everyone else still sleeping after yesterday's festivities. In the kitchen, remnants of our gathering remained. The extra leaf from the dining table leaning against the wall, waiting to be stored. A child's drawing of a turkey forgotten on the counter. The collection of serving dishes that wouldn't fit in the dishwasher. As I made coffee, I found myself replaying moments from yesterday. My mother adjusting my collar in that familiar gesture, my father's unexpected compliment about the house, the way they had interacted with our friends with growing ease as the evening progressed. Small things perhaps, but significant in their own way. The coffee maker gurgled its final notes as I heard footsteps on the stairs. Uncle Mark appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day in jeans and a sweater. His silver hair slightly rumpled. "Morning," he said, accepting the mug I offered him. "You're up early." "Lots on my mind," I admitted, leaning against the counter. "Processing yesterday." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "A day worth processing." We moved to the breakfast nook, settling into the comfortable window seat that overlooked the backyard. The rain fell softly on the lawn, turning the fallen leaves into a golden carpet dotted with puddles where the morning light reflected in broken patterns. "Do you think anything will really change?" I asked finally, voicing the question that had been circling in my mind since my parents had driven away yesterday. Mark considered this, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on what you mean by change. Will your mother suddenly become introspective and self-aware? Will your father start enthusiastically discussing your design projects? Probably not." I smiled at the unlikely images. "Probably not," I agreed. "But did something shift yesterday?" "Yes, I believe it did." He turned his mug between his hands. "They came, Emma. They showed up at your door, knowing they might not be welcome, knowing it meant acknowledging they had been wrong, or at least heavy-handed, in how they handled things. For people like your parents, that's significant." I nodded, absorbing his words. "I keep thinking about what Mom said on the porch, about never understanding my need to restore broken things, to see potential where others see only problems. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it felt like recognition of who I am, which is often the first step toward acceptance," Mark observed. "Not agreement, not complete understanding, but recognition that your path is valid, even if it's not one they would choose." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping our coffee and watching the rain. Uncle Mark had always had this quality, this ability to sit with difficult emotions without needing to fix or change them, to offer perspective without insisting on solutions. "What happens now is up to you," he said finally. "You've established your boundaries." You've shown that you won't accept being treated as less than. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want with them going forward? Assuming they continue to respect those boundaries, of course. It was a good question. One I'd been turning over in my mind since yesterday. What did I want? Not the old dynamic, certainly. The constant seeking of approval, the automatic deference to their opinions, the acceptance of unequal treatment. But complete estrangement didn't feel right either, especially for Lily and Jack's sake. I want a relationship based on mutual respect, I said slowly, where we can appreciate each other's differences without trying to change each other, where we can spend time together without walking on eggshells, where my children are valued equally alongside their cousins. Mark nodded. That sounds healthy and achievable, with time and consistent boundaries. The sound of small feet on the stairs interrupted our conversation. Lily appeared in the doorway, her hair a tangled mess, still in her unicorn pajamas. "Uncle Mark, you're still here," she exclaimed, rushing over to climb into his lap. He laughed, wrapping his arms around. Of course I am. Did you think I'd sneak away in the night?" She shook her head. "Can we have pancakes? Dad said we could have pancakes the day after Thanksgiving, too." "Did he now?" I raised an eyebrow. "Well, I suppose we can continue the tradition. Why don't you go wake up Jack and Dad while Uncle Mark and I get the batter started?" She scrambled off his lap and disappeared back upstairs, her excited voice soon echoing down the hallway as she roused her brother. That evening, after the kids were in bed, the three adults sat in the library with glasses of wine, enjoying our last night together before Mark's departure. "Have I mentioned how grateful I am that you came?" I asked him, curled up in one corner of the sofa with my feet tucked under me. "Not just for Thanksgiving itself, but for everything." He smiled, the firelight catching the silver in his hair. "You might have mentioned it once or twice, but the gratitude goes both ways. It's been a joy to be included in your family's life like this, to see the home you've created, the relationships you've built. You're always welcome here," Nathan said, raising his glass in a small toast. "Fort architect extraordinaire and wise counselor that you are." Mark laughed. "I accept both titles with honor." We talked late into the evening about everything and nothing. Books we'd read recently, projects Mark was working on at the university, a potential new client for my design business who wanted to restore a historic downtown building. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, without the careful navigation of sensitive topics that had characterized so many family gatherings in the past. It was nearly midnight when Nathan excused himself to go to bed, leaving Mark and me alone in the library. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a soft, warm glow across the room. "I have something for you," Mark said, setting down his empty glass and reaching into his pocket. "I was going to wait until Christmas, but I think now is the right time." He handed me a small velvet pouch. Curious, I loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into my palm. A delicate silver pendant on a chain. An intricate design. That looked familiar somehow. "It was your grandmother's," Mark explained. "The pattern is from the wallpaper in her childhood bedroom, the one she recreated for your mother when she was a girl, and later for you." I stared at the pendant, memories flooding back. The beautiful, hand-painted wallpaper in my childhood bedroom. Pale blue with silver vines and tiny birds hidden among the leaves. I'd loved finding those birds, counting them as I fell asleep. At night. When we moved to a different house when I was 10, I'd cried for days about leaving that wallpaper behind. "She had this made?" I asked, my voice slightly unsteady. Mark nodded. "For your mother, originally, but..." He hesitated. "Your mother never really appreciated it. She preferred more traditional jewelry, pearls, diamonds. This was too whimsical, too personal. Your grandmother took it back and kept it, saying that someday it would find its rightful owner." I closed my fingers around the pendant, feeling its delicate weight, the connection it represented to the grandmother who had seen and valued the creative, restoration-loving parts of me that my parents had never fully understood. After she died, Mark continued, I found it among her things, with a note that it should go to you when the time was right. I've been carrying it with me for years, waiting for that moment. His eyes met mine, warm with understanding. I think that moment is now, when you've fully stepped into who you are, without apology. Tears filled my eyes as I opened my hand to look at the pendant again. It was exquisite. The silver vines twining delicately around each other, the tiny birds barely visible unless you knew to look for them. Not conventionally valuable or impressive, but meaningful, personal, a talisman of being seen and understood. Thank you, I whispered, unable to find adequate words for what this gift meant to me. Mark smiled, the crinkles around his eyes deepening. She would have been so proud of you, Emma. Not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become. Someone brave enough to be authentically herself, even when it's difficult. I slipped the chain over my head, feeling the pendant settle against my collarbone. A tangible reminder of this journey I'd been on, of the strength I'd found, of the legacy of creativity and vision I carried forward. After Mark went upstairs, I remained in the library for a while, sitting by the dying fire, running my fingers over the pendant's intricate design. It felt like a circle completing, my grandmother's vision, her ability to see beauty and potential, living on through me and now perhaps through Lily with her artistic eye and creative spirit. My phone buzzed with a text, surprising me given the late hour. I expected it to be from Diane or Sarah, following up after yesterday's gathering. Instead, I saw my mother's name on the screen. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for criticism or passive-aggressive commentary. But the message was simple. Your father and I have been talking. We'd like to have you and your family over for dinner next weekend, if you're available. Nothing formal, just family time. I stared at the text, reading it twice to make sure I'd understood correctly. An invitation, a reach across the divide. A small step, perhaps, but a significant one. I typed a response, keeping it equally simple. We'd like that. Let me check our calendar and get back to you tomorrow. Her reply came almost immediately. Wonderful. Good night, Emma. I set my phone down, touching the pendant at my throat. This wasn't a magical resolution, a fairy tale ending where all past hurts were suddenly healed. It was just a dinner. Invitation. A tentative step toward whatever our relationship might become next. But it was something. A door opening, just a crack. An acknowledgement that despite our differences, despite the difficult conversations and readjusted boundaries, we were still family, still connected, still willing to try. Morning came too quickly, gray light filtering through the curtains as the alarm beeped softly. I silenced it before it could wake Nathan, slipping out of bed and into my robe for the early goodbye to Uncle Mark. Downstairs, he was already in the kitchen, suitcase by the door, making a quick cup of coffee for the road. All set? I asked, joining him at the counter. He nodded. Just need my caffeine fix before facing the highway. I noticed he was eyeing the pendant I still wore, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was the right time. He said softly. She would have agreed. I touched the silver design, feeling its reassuring weight. I'll treasure it always. We moved to the front door, both reluctant to say goodbye, but aware of the clock ticking toward his departure time. Outside, the world was still dark, though a faint lightening along the horizon promised dawn was not far off. Thank you again for coming, I said as he picked up his suitcase. For choosing our gathering over the traditional one. He smiled. Best decision I've made in years. And not just because of the mac and cheese, though that was exceptional. I laughed, grateful for the moment of lightness. Drive safely, and come back soon. The kids will be counting the days. With a final hug and promises to call soon, he was gone, his car disappearing down the driveway as the first rays of sun began to break through the clouds. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching until his taillights vanished around the curve of the road. Then I closed the door against the chill morning air and turned back to my home. My beautiful, imperfect, constantly evolving home. Bye to you. The time Nathan and the kids came downstairs, I was in the kitchen, coffee brewed, breakfast preparations underway, my grandmother's pendant catching the light as I moved. "Is Uncle Mark gone already?" Lily asked, her face falling when she realized she'd missed saying goodbye. "He had to leave early, sweetie, but he promised to come back soon." I smoothed her tangled hair. "Maybe for Christmas." Her expression brightened. "Can we make him a special room, with a sign and everything, so he knows he belongs here?" The innocent question caught me off guard with its perfect encapsulation of what I'd been trying to articulate. What it meant to belong, to have a place that was unquestionably yours, to be valued simply for who you were. "Yes," I said, my voice rougher than I'd expected. "That's a wonderful idea. We'll make sure Uncle Mark knows he always has a place here." Whatever came next with my family, the dinner next weekend, the still undetermined Christmas plans, the slow, careful renegotiation of relationships and boundaries, I would face it from this center, this knowledge of my own worth, this certainty that I didn't need to contort myself to fit someone else's expectations. My grandmother had known that, had tried to teach it to my mother, who couldn't or wouldn't learn, had recognized that same quality in me, that ability to see potential where others saw only problems, to restore what others would discard, to create beauty from brokenness. The pendant was a tangible reminder of that connection, that legacy, but the real inheritance was this certainty, this clarity about who I was and what I valued. The courage to stand in that truth, even when it was difficult. As we moved through our Saturday morning routine, pancakes and cartoons, laundry and play, the gentle rhythm of family life, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything was resolved, not because all hurts were healed, but because I had found my way through to something true and authentic. My family was still complex, still imperfect, still evolving, but so was I. So were we all. And that, I was learning, was not just okay. It was beautiful in its own way. Like a historic home with modern updates. Like a traditional room reimagined for contemporary living. Like a silver pendant that connected past to present to future. Like love itself, enduring, adapting, growing, generation after generation, finding new expressions while honoring what came before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.